I'll never forget the day my ex-boyfriend physically shoved me in front of a crowd at the most expensive mall in the city. What he didn't know. The black card in my purse had no limit, and the ring on my finger cost more than his entire net worth. But here's the crazy part: 2 years ago, I was sleeping on my friend's couch, eating ramen for dinner, wondering if I'd ever be enough for someone like him. Marcus thought he was embarrassing me that day. Instead, he gave me the most satisfying moment of my entire life. You want to know how a girl goes from being called worthless to becoming a billionaire's wife? Buckle up, because this story has more twists than you can imagine, and the look on his face at the end? Chef's kiss. Pure poetry. But before we get into this wild ride, smash that like button and subscribe, because if you love stories about karma serving cold, hard justice, you're going to want to stick around for what happens next. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Now, let me take you back 2 years. 2 years ago, I was Sarah Mitchell, just Sarah. Average girl, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet while supporting my boyfriend Marcus through his big break. He was launching a tech startup, and I believed in him. God, did I believe in him? I worked mornings at a coffee shop and evenings doing data entry. I'd come home exhausted, my feet aching, and I'd still make dinner, still listen to his pitches, still tell him he was going to make it big. When he needed money for a developer, I emptied my savings account. $3,000, every penny I had. He promised he'd pay me back when the company took off. "You're investing in our future, babe," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I believed in our future. Then his app launched. It wasn't revolutionary, but it gained traction. Suddenly, Marcus was getting invited to networking events, tech conferences, startup mixers. And suddenly, I wasn't invited anymore. "These are professional events, Sarah," he'd explain. "You wouldn't understand the conversations. It's all tech talk." I'd nod, swallow my hurt, and wait at home. The changes were gradual at first. He started dressing differently: expensive sneakers, designer hoodies, that startup bro aesthetic. He'd come home later and later, smelling like expensive cologne and craft cocktails. When I'd try to talk to him about our relationship, he'd say he was networking and that I didn't understand the startup grind. Then came the night that changed everything. It was our 3-year anniversary. I'd planned a simple dinner at home. I couldn't afford much, but I'd made his favorite meal, bought a small cake from the bakery, even splurged on a bottle of wine. I was wearing my nicest dress, which, admittedly, was a $30 clearance find from 2 years prior, but I'd tried. Marcus came home 3 hours late. "Oh, was that tonight?" he said, barely glancing at the cold food on the table. I felt something crack inside my chest. "Marcus, we talked about this last week. I reminded you this morning." He sighed, that exhausted sigh that made me feel like I was being unreasonable. "Look, Sarah, I'm building something here. I can't just drop everything for," he gestured vaguely at the table, This is our anniversary," I whispered. "Yeah, and in a few years, when the company's worth millions, we'll laugh about missing one dinner." He grabbed a beer from the fridge. "You need to think bigger, babe. Stop being so small-minded." Small-minded. The words hit like a slap. But I stayed. Because I loved him. Because I'd invested 3 years. Because I kept thinking the old Marcus was still in there somewhere. 2 weeks later, he broke up with me. We were in his new apartment he'd upgraded without telling me, moved from our modest place to a trendy loft downtown. I'd shown up with groceries, planning to surprise him with dinner. Instead, I found him packing my stuff into boxes. "What's going on?" I asked, confused. He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "Sarah, we need to talk. I've been thinking, and you're not the right fit for where I'm headed." I stared at him. "What?" "Look, you're a nice girl. But I'm moving in different circles now. I need someone who gets it, you know? Someone ambitious. Someone who can keep up." He taped up a box with my things. You're still working at a coffee shop, Sarah. I'm about to close a series of funding round. We're on different levels now. The room spun. I gave you everything. I believed in you when no one else did. I gave you my savings. And I appreciate that, he interrupted, sounding annoyed. Consider it paid back in life lessons. You got to see what it's like to be with someone who's going places. You're seriously breaking up with me because I'm not successful enough? My voice cracked. I'm breaking up with you because you're dead weight, Sarah. You're not growing. You're not evolving. You're the same girl I met 3 years ago, working the same dead-end jobs, with the same limited perspective. He handed me a box. I need someone who inspires me. Someone who challenges me. You're just there. Like furniture. I took the box, tears streaming down my face. I loved you. Yeah, well, he shrugged, already checking his phone. Love doesn't pay the bills. I left that apartment destroyed. I crashed on my best friend Jennifer's couch for 2 months, crying myself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't I be ambitious enough, successful enough? Jennifer would bring me tea and tell me Marcus was an idiot, but I couldn't hear it. Depression wrapped around me like a weighted blanket. I'd lost my boyfriend, my home, and somehow, my sense of self-worth all in one night. But Jennifer, bless her, didn't let me wallow forever. Okay, pity party's over, she announced one Saturday morning. You're volunteering with me today. I don't want to. Don't care. Get dressed. We're going to the Literacy Center. The Brightway Literacy Foundation was a program that taught adults to read. I'd expected to feel like I was just going through the motions, but something shifted when I met my first student, a 67-year-old woman named Marie who'd hidden her illiteracy her entire life and was finally ready to learn. Teaching her, seeing her face light up when she read her first sentence, watching her confidence grow, it woke something up in me. For the first time in months, I felt purposeful. I felt like I mattered. I threw myself into volunteering. 3 times a week, then 4, then 5. The program coordinator said I had a gift for connecting with students, for making them feel safe enough to be vulnerable. For the first time since the breakup, I felt like maybe I wasn't worthless after all. That's where I met Alexander. It was a rainy Tuesday evening, and I was setting up materials for my next session when this tall, distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit walked into the center. He didn't look like our usual visitors. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his watch to the way he carried himself. Can I help you? I asked, assuming he was lost. He smiled, and it was warm, genuine. I hope so. I'm Alexander Chen. My foundation funds this program. I like to visit occasionally, see the impact firsthand. Would you mind if I observed your session? I later learned that Alexander Chen was the CEO of Chen Global Industries, a Fortune 500 company worth billions. His grandfather had been illiterate, worked in factories his whole life, and Alexander had built his empire partly in his grandfather's honor. But in that moment, I just saw a man interested in the work. Sure, I said, nervous. Though I should warn you, we're pretty casual here. That evening, Alexander sat quietly in the back while I worked with 3 students. I forgot he was there, honestly. I was too focused on helping James sound out difficult words, encouraging Patricia through her frustration, celebrating when Carlos finished an entire paragraph. After the session, Alexander approached me. That was remarkable, he said. You have a real gift. The way you encouraged them, how you made them feel capable, that's rare. I blushed. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough. I want them to know they are. Something flickered in his eyes. Would you join me for coffee? I'd love to hear more about your approach to teaching. I almost said no. I wasn't ready to trust anyone, especially not some billionaire who probably wanted something. But there was something genuine in his expression, so I agreed. We went to a small cafe nearby, probably the least expensive place Alexander Chen had been in years, but he didn't seem to care. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his grandfather, about his passion for education equity, about his struggles taking over the family business after his father's death. I told him about my students, about finding purpose after feeling purposeless, about wanting to make a difference. I didn't tell him about Marcus. That wound was still too fresh. "Would you consider coming to our foundation gala next month?" he asked as we were leaving. "I'd love for you to meet our board, share your insights about the program." I looked down at my worn jeans and clearance rack sweater. "I don't think I'm gala material." "I think you're exactly what we need," he said firmly. "Someone who actually understands the mission. Please consider it." He handed me his card, his personal card, with his cell phone number. That's how it started. Not with romance, but with respect. With someone seeing value in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. Alexander and I became friends first. He'd stop by the literacy center, ask about my students, share ideas for expanding the program. He'd text me articles about education, funny memes, random thoughts. He treated me like an equal, like my opinions mattered, like I had something valuable to contribute. Slowly, I started to heal. The wound Marcus left began to scar over. 3 months after we met, Alexander took me to dinner at a restaurant so fancy I had to Google the dress code. I was terrified I'd use the wrong fork or say something stupid, but Alexander made it easy. He made everything easy. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said over dessert. My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. The revelation that ruins everything. "I have feelings for you, Sarah," he continued. "I have for a while now. But I didn't want to say anything because I know you've been through something painful. I can see it, even though you've never told me the details." He reached across the table, hovering near my hand but not quite touching. "I don't want to pressure you. But I also can't keep pretending I only see you as a friend. You're remarkable, and I'd like the chance to show you how remarkable I think you are." I started crying right there in the fancy restaurant. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I'm such a mess. I'm not in your league. I work at a coffee shop and volunteer. You're a literal billionaire. I don't even have a college degree. My ex told me I was dead weight, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I was too small-minded, and maybe he was right." "Stop." Alexander's voice was firm but gentle. He did take my hand then. "That man was an idiot. You're one of the most purposeful, impactful people I've ever met. You changed lives every week at that center. You see people really see them and make them feel valuable. That's a gift most people spend their whole lives never developing." He squeezed my hand. "I don't care about degrees or job titles. I care about character. And yours is extraordinary." I told him everything that night. About Marcus, the breakup, how broken I'd felt. Alexander listened without judgment, just steady support. "He didn't deserve you," Alexander said simply. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend however long it takes proving to you that you deserve everything good this world has to offer." We took it slow. Alexander never pushed, never rushed. He courted me, and yes, I mean actual courting. Flowers. Handwritten notes. Thoughtful dates that weren't about showing off wealth but about actually connecting. He met Jennifer, who immediately approved. He learned about my students, remembered their names, asked about their progress. 6 months later, he proposed. Not with a flashy public display, but privately, in the literacy center after hours, surrounded by books and the evidence of changed lives. "Marry me," he said, no preamble. "Not because of what I can give you, but because of what we can build together. You've shown me that success without purpose is empty. Let me show you that you're worth more than you ever imagined." I said yes through tears. The ring was stunning, a custom design, elegant and timeless. I later learned it cost more than Marcus's entire startup valuation. But what mattered was the meaning. Alexander had chosen a design that reminded him of me, of my strength and grace. We got married 3 months later in a small, intimate ceremony. Alexander offered to throw a massive society wedding, but I wanted something meaningful, with people who actually cared about us. Jennifer was my maid of honor. My literacy students came. Alexander's close family and friends. It was perfect. Being married to Alexander was different than anything I'd imagined. Yes, there was wealth, absurd, almost incomprehensible wealth. But more than that, there was partnership. Alexander valued my input on his foundation's work. He funded an expansion of the literacy program based on my suggestions. He introduced me as his equal, never as just his wife. I quit the coffee shop and focused on the foundation full-time, developing new programs, training volunteers. I found my calling, my purpose. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. And I almost never thought about Marcus anymore. Until that day at the mall. It was a Saturday afternoon, about 18 months after Alexander and I got married. I was shopping for a gift for Jennifer's birthday at Meridian Plaza, one of those ultra-luxury malls where everything costs more than a car payment. I was wearing a cream cashmere sweater Alexander had bought me, perfectly tailored trousers, and carrying a Hermes bag, a gift from Alexander's mother who'd welcomed me into the family with open arms. My wedding ring, a stunning emerald-cut diamond, caught the light as I moved. I was browsing at a high-end jewelry store, looking at necklaces for Jennifer, when I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. No way. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? I turned slowly. Marcus stood there, and for a moment, I barely recognized him. He still had that startup bro aesthetic, but it was trying too hard, expensive brands worn without understanding, flashy without being tasteful. Next to him was a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of Instagram, all filters and contour, clinging to his arm. Marcus, I said neutrally. His eyes raked over me, and I saw confusion flicker across his face. This wasn't the broken girl he'd thrown away. Wow, you look different, he said, and there was something in his tone I didn't like. Shopping here? Didn't know they had a clearance section. His girlfriend giggled. I felt my face flush, old wounds suddenly raw. Just browsing. Right. Marcus moved closer, and I could smell his cologne, too much, trying too hard. So what are you up to these days? Still pouring coffee and playing teacher? I work in education, I said simply. Oh, so still the same. He shook his head in that condescending way I'd forgotten about. You know, I always told you needed more ambition. Some people are just meant for simple lives, I guess. His girlfriend whispered something to him, and they both laughed. Something dark unfurled in my chest. The old Sarah would have shrunk away, made herself smaller, apologized for existing. But I wasn't that Sarah anymore. And you? I asked coolly. How's the startup? His chest puffed up. Amazing, actually. We just closed our Series B. I'm basically killing it in the tech space. Got a new Porsche, penthouse downtown, the whole package. He gestured to his girlfriend. Living the dream. That's wonderful, I said, meaning none of it. I turned back to the jewelry case, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. Instead, Marcus stepped closer, deliberately invading my space. Sarah, he said, loud enough that people were starting to look. You know, I've gotta say, I'm glad I dodged that bullet. Can you imagine if I'd stayed with you? I'd probably still be in that crappy apartment, eating your budget meals, listening to you talk about teaching people to read. He laughed. I need a woman who matches my energy, you know? Someone on my level. His girlfriend preened. The sales associate looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. Marcus, I should get going, I started. What, got some clearance rack to hit up? He actually laughed. Come on, Sarah, this store is way out of your budget. These pieces cost more than you make in a year. Unless they're hiring baristas at better rates now? I felt 2 years of healing threaten to crack. Old doubts whispered, he's right, you don't belong here, you're pretending, you're not enough. Then Marcus did something I'll never forget. As I moved to step past him, he actually nudged me with his shoulder, not hard enough to make me fall, but enough to make me stumble, enough to humiliate me. Oops, sorry, he said, not sorry at all. You should watch where you're going. Wouldn't want you to break something you can't afford to replace. People were staring now. His girlfriend was smirking. The sales associate looked horrified. I opened my mouth, ready to finally tell Marcus exactly what I thought of him, when I heard a voice that made my entire body relax. Sarah, darling, there you are. Alexander appeared at my side, and it was like watching a scene change in a movie. He was coming from a business meeting full suit, commanding presence, the kind of man who turns heads just by existing. He wrapped his arm around my waist protectively, and I felt safe immediately. Marcus's face went through several emotions, confusion, recognition, and then stark, dawning horror. Alexander, I said, smiling up at my husband. I was just finishing up. Take your time, he said warmly, pressing a kiss to my temple. Then he looked at Marcus for the first time, polite but distant. I'm sorry, do we know you? Marcus had gone pale. You're Alexander Chen. I am. Alexander's tone was professionally cordial, nothing more. Chen Global Industries, Marcus stammered. Wow. I've followed your career. You're a legend in the business world. My company recently applied to be a vendor for your tech infrastructure project. Did you? It wasn't a question. Alexander's arm tightened slightly around me. The sales associate, who'd been watching with wide eyes, suddenly rushed over. Mrs. Chen. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you'd arrived. Let me show you that private collection we discussed for your friend's gift. Mrs. Chen. The name hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus's girlfriend gasped. Marcus himself looked like he'd been punched. You're married? Marcus choked out. To him? I smiled, and it wasn't kind. 2 years now. But, you were, when Marcus couldn't seem to form complete sentences. Alexander, who'd been watching this exchange with growing understanding, spoke up. His voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name? Marcus. Marcus Rivers. Rivers Tech Solutions. He stuck out his hand desperately. Alexander didn't take it. Yes, Rivers Tech. I believe we received your vendor application. He paused, and the silence was devastating. We've decided to go in a different direction. Marcus's face crumbled. But, we haven't even had the final meeting yet. Won't be necessary, Alexander said smoothly. We're very selective about who we partner with. Character matters as much as capability. His eyes were cold. Did I hear you correctly before? Did you just physically shove my wife? People were definitely watching now. The mall had gone quiet around us. It was just, we have history, I didn't mean. Marcus was sweating now. History, I said softly, finding my voice. Yes, we do. You told me I was dead weight. That I wasn't ambitious enough. That I was too small-minded to keep up with you. I looked him directly in the eyes. You threw away 3 years because I wasn't successful enough for your image. Marcus's girlfriend had detached herself from his arm, looking mortified. Sarah, come on, I was young, I was stupid. You were cruel, I corrected. You made me feel worthless because I didn't measure success the way you did. You took my savings and gave me nothing but contempt in return. Alexander's expression had gone glacial. You took money from her? It was a loan. For the business. I was going to pay it back. $3,000, I said. You promised it was an investment in our future. Alexander pulled out his phone. Name of your company again? Rivers Tech Solutions, Marcus whispered, all the bravado gone. Alexander typed something, then looked up. Your Series B closed at $12 million. Interesting valuation for a company with your revenue numbers. He put his phone away. I'll make sure our investment team knows to steer clear. We tend to share information about character concerns in our network. Marcus's face went from pale to green. One comment from Alexander Chen could tank his company's reputation in the industry. Please, Marcus said, and he was actually begging now. I made mistakes. I was an idiot. Sarah, you have to understand, I was different then. No, I said firmly. You were exactly who you are now. The only difference is now you're seeing consequences. The sales associate reappeared, reading the room perfectly. Mrs. Chen, I have the private viewing room ready whenever you'd like. And sir, she looked at Marcus with ice in her eyes, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't tolerate aggressive behavior toward our clients. I wasn't aggressive, it was just. 2 security guards appeared. Apparently someone had called them. Time to go, sir, one of them said firmly. As they escorted Marcus and his girlfriend away, Marcus looked back one more time. The expression on his face, shock, regret, humiliation, and the dawning realization of what he'd thrown away, I'll remember it forever. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt free. Alexander waited until they were gone, then cupped my face gently. Are you all right? I nodded, surprised to find I was. Yeah. Actually, I really am. He's the ex. He's the ex. Alexander kissed my forehead. His loss. My extraordinary gain. He smiled. Now, shall we find Jennifer's gift? And perhaps something for you? That emerald necklace would look stunning on you. Alexander, you just bought me. I didn't buy you anything. I'm simply enjoying spoiling my brilliant, compassionate, remarkable wife who makes the world better just by being in it. He took my hand. Humor me. As we walked into the private viewing room, I glanced back one more time. Through the mall's windows, I could see Marcus being escorted out, his girlfriend arguing with him, his entire demeanor deflated. 2 years ago, that man had made me feel worthless. He'd convinced me I wasn't enough. Now, I knew the truth, I'd always been enough. More than enough. He'd just been too shallow to see it. I squeezed Alexander's hand, and he squeezed back, understanding without words. Later that night, over dinner at home, Alexander brought it up again. I want you to know, he said carefully, that what you said about being not in my league when we first started dating, I need you to understand something. You were never beneath me, Sarah. If anything, I was intimidated by you. I laughed. Intimidated? By me? By your capacity for compassion. Your purpose. Your genuine care for others. He reached across the table. I'd spent my whole life building wealth and power. But you? You were changing lives in that literacy center. You made people feel seen and valued. That's a kind of wealth I could never buy. I felt tears prick my eyes. Marcus was wrong about everything, Alexander continued. You weren't dead weight. You were the foundation he was too stupid to appreciate. And his loss, he smiled, became the greatest gift of my life. I love you, I whispered. I love you too. And tomorrow, I'm having our lawyers draft a letter to Marcus Rivers about that $3,000, with 18 months of interest. I laughed through my tears. You don't have to do that. I absolutely do. Call it a reminder that debts, financial and karmic, always come due. The next week, Marcus tried to reach out. He sent emails, tried calling, even showed up at the foundation office. Security turned him away each time. He wrote a long message apologizing, saying he'd been wrong, that he saw now what he'd lost. He said he'd made a mistake, that he'd been blinded by ambition, that he'd always actually loved me. I deleted it without responding. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some people show you exactly who they are, and you should believe them the first time. Marcus taught me what I didn't want. Alexander taught me what I deserved. 6 months after the mall incident, I heard through Jennifer that Rivers Tech Solutions folded. Turns out Marcus's Series B investors got cold feet after some concerning due diligence findings. I don't know if Alexander had anything to do with that, and I never asked. All I know is this: the girl Marcus threw away for not being ambitious enough now runs a foundation that's changed thousands of lives. The girl he called dead weight is married to a man who treats her like she's priceless. And Marcus? Well, last I heard, he's working for someone else's startup, no longer the CEO of his own dreams. Karma doesn't always come when you call it, but when it arrives, it's devastating. I think about that moment in the mall sometimes, the look on Marcus's face when he realized what he'd lost, not just me but any chance of redemption. And I'm grateful, in a strange way. He broke me down so thoroughly that I had to rebuild from scratch. And in rebuilding, I became someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. The best revenge isn't cruelty. It's becoming so happy, so fulfilled, so completely at peace with yourself that your former abuser becomes irrelevant. Just a footnote in your origin story. Marcus wanted to embarrass me at that mall. Instead, he gave me closure I didn't even know I needed. And that, my friends, is how the girl who was once told she wasn't enough became more than her critic could ever imagine. So what's the moral of this story? It's simple: your value isn't determined by people who can't see it. Marcus couldn't see my worth, so he invented a narrative where I was the problem. But I wasn't the problem. I was always enough. I just needed to believe it myself. If you're going through something similar, if someone's made you feel small or worthless or not enough, please hear me, they're wrong. The problem isn't your lack of value. It's their inability to recognize it. Find your literacy center. Find the thing that reminds you of your purpose. Surround yourself with people who see you clearly. And one day, you'll run into your Marcus, and instead of pain, you'll feel nothing but gratitude that they left. Because their exit made room for your Alexander, whatever form that takes in your life. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about karma, redemption, and finding your worth. Drop a comment below. Have you ever run into an ex who didn't expect you to be thriving? I want to hear your stories.